Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for another Zoomcast. And I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host and co-author, Jessica Midkiff. Jessica, how are you doing?
Pretty good, Alan. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this conversation, this Zoomcast we're going to have.
It's about to be lit. About to have a good time.
Well, we have a special guest today. As always, we always have a special guest. And today's special guest is the famous... What's that?
Drum roll.
Oh, drum roll. Drum roll.
Drum roll.
She's known all over the United States. She's an incredible person out doing a lot of amazing things. And we're going to bring in Rebecca Bender. Let's see if she can get in here. Where's she at? There she is. There she is, the famous Rebecca Bender. How are you, Rebecca?
Hello. It's so fun.
Rebecca, it is so fun to be doing this with you because we somehow became social media friends, a couple years ago, whenever it was. And you have the most unique way that you do your thing. You have like a running dialogue with the world, whoever's watching, on just whatever's happening on your social media and it's just so funny because like sometimes you're working on your beehive and sometimes you're cheering on your daughter running track and sometimes you're putting deep sort of incredible teachings and words on social media about this issue of human trafficking. It's just like this running dialogue. So it's fun to
Thank you.
It's fun to enter your world right now.
It's fun to remind people that we are more than our stories,
right,
as survivors and as survivor leaders and those having lived experience, that we have talents and gifts and abilities and interests that go far beyond one bad thing that happened to us years ago, right? And we can use it to help, but we're more than that. And so that's part of our passion here at Elevate, is to just remind people that survivors are people too.
That's it. Well, and that very concept actually inspired the very end of the book. I say we saved the best for last, and we're going to talk about the book here in a second. And it's called More Than a Survivor. And there's a number of amazing survivors that we all know and love, Harmony and Nola and Rachel Thomas, and you're in there, Rebecca, although you don't do a lot of your story for other reasons. But it's this amazing opportunity to hear from everybody that they are more than a survivor. And so that's incredible. Okay, real quick, before we get into the topic, tell us a little bit about, you just mentioned Elevate, the Rebecca Bender Initiative. Tell us what you do to fill your day. There's a lot of amazing work. I know you're teaching and training a lot and doing all kinds of survivor mentorship. Break us down. Give us the elevator pitch of what's happening at Rebecca Bender Initiative.
Yeah, so it's so much, right? We're all trying to do a ton of things with a small budget and few but mighty team members. And so my day gets really full really quickly because of our size. But at Elevate, we lead leaders to fight trafficking, change culture, and impact lives. That's what we try to do. That's our North Star. That means we train community professionals, we do community awareness, we create content and e-courses and a variety of multimedia resources to help really shift the narrative in terms of fighting trafficking, and also to really train community professionals on how to identify and respond. But then we also have this online school for survivors because we want to really impact leaders in all the different spheres. And so our online school, Elevate Academy, is a job readiness career development program. We have almost 900 students in 425 U.S. cities. And we are revamping some of that right now. So I don't know when all of this is going to air, when you're going to put this out, but we are really focusing on what we're good at. And that does mean cutting a couple classes and making a few changes. So when this airs, we'll see how many students we have then. But, we can't all do it all. And we have to be collaborative in the space, you have to really figure out what you're good at and then collaborate and work with groups that do other things and create that network so that we can all come together and really support people to the best of our abilities and make a difference. That's kind of my goal. But
yeah, that's fantastic. And somewhere along the way, you had enough time to write this little gem. I happen to have my very own copy. Somehow or other, I got to figure out a way to get it autographed. I don't know how we're going to do that.
I'll have to send you one.
Oh, that's incredible. But I actually got it kind of recently. I haven't actually even read it yet, other than just a couple of quick things. So tell us briefly, it's your memoir, it's your life story in there. I know that much.
Yeah.
Tell us what's going on. When I read that, what am I going to find out?
Well, the Audible is really good. If you like Audible books and you commute, it's me reading it, so you get to hear the real way that slang is used. That was my biggest thing when getting the Audible. I was like, I just don't, I'm afraid someone's not going to really know how it's supposed to be like sound. So, yeah, it's really just my story. It's my faith-based testimony. So it is a faith-based book. Just my story of trafficking and trying to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I think at the root core, the theme, which we tried to encompass in the title, but at the end of the day, we all just want to love and be loved. That's it. We all just want to have a sense of belonging. And that's why high risk, when we screen traffic victims for that phrase, high risk, and there's a variety of factors that put people at risk. But some things I find is that we want a community, we want to belong, we want to love and be loved. And when you're vulnerable due to a variety of other factors, and you've been desensitized and exposed to a variety of other things, criminal activity, abuse, poverty, it's like it's compounded that need. And it's really easy when a trafficker comes along and promises you all of those needs, and you don't see a ton of red flags because you've been desensitized, and they're offering love, to love and to belong. And so that's kind of the story, is just this. It's not kidnapping. It's a story of my personal journey of just getting swept up, and then my testimony of God's pursuit of us through it, even when you don't know. Yeah, so that's it. I have another book coming out later this year. It's a Bible study. It's my first Bible study that's not trafficking related. So I'm really excited to just have something different out there. And
Well, congratulations. The book is In Pursuit of Love, which backs up what you just mentioned. That's fantastic. Okay, let's get into it. So as you know, Rebecca, Jessica and I have co-authored this book, and the words, I don't know if you know this part, the words that we heard, Jessica and our friend Rachel Thomas appeared on a panel discussion a few years ago and telling their stories. And Rachel said at one point in the middle of her story, she said, I could no longer fight for myself. I needed someone to fight for me. And that really grabbed a hold of me. That really sort of lit a fire in me, because it's sort of like, okay, she just told me unofficially, but officially, that there's a lot of kids out there, victims, I guess, of all ages, but as we focus on minors with Saving Innocence, that want to be doing something else. They don't want to be there, but they've given up. They've waved the white flag. This is all I can do. There's no way out, and they need someone else to fight for them. And so that lit a little bit of fire inside of me. And then later on, we added the word men to the title. She didn't say that, but we added the word men because it's a book aimed at men, the male audience. And so I approached Jessica. What do you think? She said, I'm in immediately.
Love it.
And so, yeah, we're walking through it. And at some point I approached you and a number of others. Would you like to contribute? And you guys jumped in. So it's been really fun to get to this place. So having set that stage, the middle of the book, kind of the meat of the book, we call it the big three. There's a chapter on the buyers, a chapter on the traffickers, and a chapter on the victims, sort of the three main players in this crime that's happening. And today we're going to talk about the victims. And so let's just throw it out here, kind of the 30,000 foot view. And some of the questions that your basic person is just learning about this, like, well, who are these victims? Like, who is this that's happening? Like, what's the 30,000 foot view? Why is it happening? We can get into a lot of different things, but like, who are these victims? Who are these human trafficking victims? What would you guys say to that? How would you phrase it? How would you answer that, Rebecca? Why don't you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to probably be really thoughtful around this, a spectrum, right? From victim to survivor. There's this spectrum of when you're first being, dating, grooming, being recruited, all of the high ACEs, adverse childhood experiential study. That's what ACEs stands for. When you have all these high risk screening indicators, there's all these vulnerabilities, high ACEs, and you're in one of those phases of dating, grooming, recruiting, all of those things, all the way through being in the middle of the exploitation and all the complex compound trauma that takes place from this prolonged exposure to fear and abuse. And then it compounds and creates all these barriers, right? Whether it's the mental health component, complex compound trauma, PTSD, criminal records, gap in job history, all the way to through that what we would call a stages of change model. And what a lot of people have called, I think GEMS probably, Rachel Lloyd was probably the one that adapted the stage of change model to fit human trafficking. And so from that, then that pre-contemplative, contemplative, and escape stage, where now you're not a victim, you're a survivor, and you're trying to figure out normalcy, and you're trying to figure out how to overcome all these barriers. And that really leads, I think, on that spectrum that this field developed long before I got in it. I'm just jumping in, learning about that spectrum of survivorship from so many other people that have gone before me. And I'm so grateful that they've kind of toiled the ground. So I don't know, that's probably not exactly what you're looking for, but I just think it was important. We talk about victim. It's also to survivor, to thriver, to all these varying things that I know VSL is a training that GEMS does. And so I just think it's important to point out none of these things are anything I'm coming up with on my own.
Yeah. Jessica and I we actually talked about the fact, do we want to call the chapter victims? Do we want to use a different word or a combination of words? And we stayed with the word victim. The average age of entry is, 12, 13, 14 years old. And at some level, they are a victim of something being done to them. And so we did leave it there. Jessica, what would you add? Who are these victims? What's going on? Who are they from your experience? What have you seen?
Oof. So Rebecca, you killed it. So there's not much I really need to add to it, because really she embodied the whole essence of it, right? And so even looking from a personal standpoint, it is the child that we usually see that is coming from a background of abuse, from needing, from neglect, from all these difficult things, but also those kids that do come from good homes, that do come from good backgrounds, that do have a lot. But I think the ones that we kind of tend to focus on right now, and I could be wrong, you can shout in any point, Rebecca, who we kind of tend to wrap around right now are those kids that are coming from, just the horrible backgrounds that don't really have too many resources, like you were saying before. I always like to say the victims look like everybody on here, man and female, all different races, all different sizes. It's once people start understanding that it's everyone, and that it's a possibility of being anyone and everyone, then we'll actually get somewhere, and we'll actually start healing, basically. So I hope that answered it.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, just kind of painting the broad brush. It can be anyone, but the higher percentage of the quote victims, they are coming from a rough early childhood, most of them. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so Rebecca, a few years ago, there was a national case happening. Survivor by the name of Cyntoia Brown had been trafficked and killed one of her perpetrators and got sentenced to life as a 15-year-old, I think. And now she was coming up for parole. And I remembered seeing, again, I'm in the fan of Rebecca Bender's social media. I learned things. And you were saying something like, send a letter to the Governor Haslam in Tennessee. I think it's Tennessee, wasn't it? And I thought, wait a minute. I know people that know him. I don't know him, but I know people that know him very well. I can literally get a letter to him. So I immediately called Jessica. I said, Jessica, I'm not a lawyer. We're not going to argue the merits of the case. Whatever happened, happened. I want this governor to understand what Cyntoia was likely going through in that moment. What was her mindset as a young girl being trafficked? And maybe that'll help him understand how outdated and how inappropriate this sentencing was from him. Jessica, do you remember some of the things you told me of the mindset of a child being trafficked? What are they thinking about?
Oh my gosh, it was so much that day. I think it was a pretty in-depth conversation, but I mean, just even the situation that she was caught up in that particular moment, not even getting in or getting out and going into this time of being in prison, but being afraid and survival and knowing that you have to meet a quota and knowing if things don't get done, what's going to happen to me, and wanting to sustain a level of the abuse that she's already enduring, or it's that ride or die, I have to do what I have to do. But really it came down to, it's either me or him, and a lot of times too with the kids, when these things happen, when there's rape, attempted rape, some type of assault, whatever it is, the child is never believed to be the victim. It's always the perp, unfortunately. And it was highly unfair for her to get sentenced the way that she did. However, it did show too how in depth it really, how the world really looks at those that are caught up in the life, that are actually stuck. And the biggest word that I can come up with is survival in every part of the word. Every inch of the word is survival. And yeah.
Yeah. I'm taking notes while we're talking because I have so many things that I just wanted to write down one word so I would remember. So if you see me looking down, it's because I'm taking notes. That's why I keep showing you my pen, so no one thinks I'm on my phone. But I don't want to forget because there's so much here to unpack. One of the things I love you just said about surviving and all of these facets is one of the things I think is so valuable about this specific case and so many others like it is it shows us how far our field has come. And it also shows us how much work there is still to be done, right? It shows us that there's so many people who nowadays are, not to say that that still doesn't happen, believe me, we know cases right now where children are still being sentenced to unfair sentences due to crimes their trafficker has made them commit or they felt, in danger. Anyway, but there's also so many that have been prosecuted. I know we had a case recently where a young person, she was 22, she'd been trafficked for a long time. Her trafficker was sentenced to 31 years in prison. Whereas just 6 years prior, I had a 14-year-old traffic victim who ended up being my foster daughter, and her trafficker only got 5 years in prison. So you think about just in 6 years, we went from 5-year sentence to a 14-year-old child, which usually sentencing structure is way more advanced for anyone under the age of 15 or 16, depending on your state, all the way to 6 years later, we have a 22-year-old victim, and that trafficker is getting 31 years. Like, we have advanced in how we prosecute and how we look at sentencing structure and stigmas around victimology. There's still a long way to go because that's not the outcome for every case and every situation, I know. But I also think it's important to know that what we're doing matters and to keep it up, keep going, keep fighting for people to, have their records expunged, to get off, to get on parole, all the things. We want to keep fighting. But it also shows us that as our field advances, there's a lot of what we train when we're training law enforcement and district attorneys on a phrase called the spectrum of culpability. And so we can picture this in a variety of crimes, and trafficking is not excluded from that, right? There's a victim offender culpability spectrum. Where does a victim become culpable in crime? And I think we all, if you can take a really simple example, just improving one off the top of my head. Let's say today I say, hey, Jessica, jump in the car with me. I want to go down to the Quickie Mart. And she's like, okay. And I say, hey, can you drive? My tank's on empty. She's like, sure. So we get in her car and we drive to the Quickie Mart. On my way there, I don't tell her. I go inside. I rob the Quickie Mart. Is she culpable? She didn't know. She didn't know my intention. She didn't know my plan. If we get in, so you'd probably say on the culpability spectrum, she's really low, right? But if we get in the car and I'm like, hey, when we get here, I need you to keep it running because I'm about to rob this place. She might go, I ain't down for that. Or no, I'm not, but now I've already half jumped out of the car and she's like, oh no, what do I do? And I'm quick as she can think of, do I leave her? I'm back in the car. Is she culpable? I don't know. Some people would argue no, right? And some people would be like, she should have left you there. At what point in that split second do you cross some lines on that spectrum? And then all the way to I get in the car right away and go, hey, I'm going to rob a bank. And you're like, cool, I'm going to drive you. I'm going to keep it. I got balaclava right under my seat. Let me help you out. Then that's a whole other side of this spectrum of culpability. And so I think it's easy for us to make these quick assumptions about variety of trafficking we see in our communities and we see on the news and we hear about. But what we don't see is sometimes open case information has a lot of weighing factors on where people lie on this spectrum. And that's why trainings matter. That's why what you guys are doing at Saving Innocence matters. The partnerships for law enforcement to learn more about it matters, so that we can help people better understand that victim mindset, especially as of a child, so that the culpability can be assessed accurately. That's, I think, the concerning component. But anyway, it's kind of a longer explanation of victimology and spectrum of culpability.
No, but that's really great, though. And I'm happy you brought it up, because a lot of people, they still ask the questions of like, well, why is she still here? Or why is she not moving? Or why is she not? Why is she not? And it goes so much deeper. So like you had the one where she knows nothing. Then you have the one that knows everything. But there's that one in the middle, right? And even if she's like, I know it's wrong, what if it was, well, if I leave, it's going to get back to the hood. It's going to get back and I'm going to be in danger. My family's going to be in danger. Everyone, so it's kind of like, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. And that's, I think, what people really don't understand, especially if they don't have to live that type of life, or they've never been conditioned, because that is a conditioning that happens. We see so many young kids and adults that end up going to jail because it's like, do I do the right thing and drive away, or and risk getting harmed or killed, or my family getting harmed in the process, or whatever it may be? Or do I stay and try to figure out or weigh out, hey, am I going to jail or not? And
when you're younger, that conditioning is so important, because what you've been modeled as a child becomes your norm, right? We use the word, what's familiar. Well, what's the root word of familiar? Family. So what we've been modeled growing up becomes just familiar. If I've seen my mom or dad robbing Quickie Marts my whole life, then I might not be as scared in that moment, because I'm like, oh yeah, we used to do this when I was little. And so it's not as much of a shock factor for people that have been desensitized to violence and abuse. It doesn't come across as immediate as maybe someone who hasn't. And so I just think there's so much more context with every person's predisposition for the high risk factors that come into play, why people freeze, why do we have fight, flight, or freeze, and that things change so quickly. It's really hard when you're a young person who's experienced a lot of vulnerabilities. It's hard to make really sound, quick decisions in the blink of an eye, right? Like, I hear people like, well, why didn't you run? And I'm like, well, I did. Why do you think I'm standing here? I did run. It just took me a while to figure out how to do it. Right. And I learned with every attempt what to do better next time, because that last time didn't work well. And I think it's funny. We talk to people when they are asking questions. I'm like, well, what do you expect kids to say? Well, due to my desensitization at the early age of 5, the neurology and the trauma of my brain, like, no one talks like that when you're younger. And so it's just like giving people an opportunity to really be empathetic with all of the things as a healthy adult brain. You're asking, well, what was their neurology and trauma like pre-exploitation? What was their desensitization like? What was their, there's just so much more to the story that really plays a factor into how people think. And just those split-second decisions are difficult. I mean, I can remember even the first time I got trafficked. I remember the first time I was sold, I remember just freezing. Like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then the situation changed. And so by the time you think of what to do, now the whole situation's different. Now you got to think about what to do again. Right? And so it just like things happen quickly sometimes. And we all have had things that we regret. We wish we would have done different. I wish I would have said different. Oh, I wish I would have done. And like traffic victims are no different. In the middle of things, there's oftentimes that we're like, I wish I would have not froze, but I did. And so I don't know all I can do is try to figure out my next best thing,
Yeah. But that's the survival piece of it too, is trying to figure out and stay steps ahead when you're in reality, you're never going to be those steps ahead, because that's how that whole structure is set up. You know what I mean? It's to keep you in the dark, but I'm going to give you the illusion that you do have control. So why did you freeze? You should have fought. Because if that was me, it's that kind of but you're always steps behind, no matter how far you think you are getting ahead, you're never ahead. Yeah. And so it's just like bringing that up. I think that's just so important, because people tend to take, when it comes to these types of cases of children being picked up for these charges that they have no control over, they cannot consent to. They take it for face value. Oh, well, she's a prostitute. She chose this. This is what she wanted to do. Even kids that went through things before, and you described it so eloquently. It's the sayings of, oh, well, she was just fast. She wanted to. Oh, well, he's just. It's those types of things, and it's just, hopefully with these conversations in this book, it helps to take the blinders off or the foggers off, to help people not see these things for face value, to really delve deeper, you know what I mean, and say, okay, so what was the situation? How was this all set up? I love that you're hitting every single point, because this is like what's been needed, because we still struggle with it. Yeah, we're far ahead in the system, but we still struggle from case to case by case.
We do.
Well, Jess, you led off with an important word that's in the book, and by the way, in this chapter of the book, I list all those things that you said. And so to really find out the mindset of this child, you'll find things about how they're feeling subhuman and feeling like they could die today. Like every day they're thinking I could die today, kind of a thing. It's pretty powerful. But the one word you mentioned a minute ago was survival mode. You said it a few times. And Rebecca, you kind of alluded to that. I wish I would have said that. I'm just trying to say what I need to do is survival is happening. And when you compound that on the fact that we're talking about, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids and even younger, how in the world is there enough life experience to survive anything? You shouldn't be put in that position to have to survive. And I thought to myself, I don't know that I've ever actually been in a real survival situation. I didn't become a cop. I didn't join the military. I'm not a fireman on the top of the burning building. I mean, I don't have choices every day that determine whether I live or die that day. And the one thing that I've heard over and over and over again, from some of our friends, Jessica included, has said it, but many others, is that literally that's the default setting for so many of these young people being trafficked. It's like, I need to survive today and then do it all over again, which is incredibly powerful.
It's really too. I mean, when you said that, I'm almost getting teary-eyed thinking, I forget that there's people that haven't lived with an experience of that level of fear ever. Like, no, wait, there are people that have never had the moment when you don't know how you're going to get out of this. There's so many in the life of human trafficking. That's the hard part. It's like, it literally feels like every time you knock on a door or jump in a car, you're playing Russian roulette. I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know if I'm going to be hurt. I don't know if this will be the last time I see my baby. I don't know. And sometimes things go fine. And that's where I think there's this false sense of empowerment, because either way, living in a prolonged state of fear like that has some real serious mental health effects on people. And even if you didn't have any experiences in the life of trafficking, which is where I think we find this false sense of empowerment sold with the sex industry, it's like still living in that constant state of unknown will actually affect you. And even people that are 18, 19, 20, name a 20-year-old that made the best decisions every single time. It's like, just because someone turns 18 on their 18th birthday, they don't blow out the candles and suddenly have cognitive reasoning. Like, it just doesn't work like that. It's like, oh, I'm 18 now, sir. I'm sorry. Now I suddenly completely know how to handle my trafficker. It just like, I heard somewhere one time someone say trafficked kids grow up to be trafficked adults when not found. Yeah. And I just found that so powerful, where we think of minors and adults because of different licensing requirements for us as nonprofits. But at the end of the day, a lot of these 18, 19, 20, I think I was 27 by the time I got out of the game. Maybe, I don't even remember. I'd have to do the math. I'm not that good at math. But I think back to all of the things that led me to those things to those experiences that made me feel like certain choices were empowering, just really being sold this false sense of empowerment by my family, by culture, by the guy I was with, just so many things that desensitized me, that at 18, it felt like that was a really great option for the lesser of two evils in front of me. And really, I felt tricked. I felt defrauded by a guy I thought was really my boyfriend. I didn't know he was a trafficker and had another girl until I got there. And then I felt very like, in this blink of a moment, I have to make a decision. And it's not easy. And it, then you have to live with your, what's happening and figure it out from there. It's not simple.
Rebecca, you just said something interesting. Every time you get in a car, it's like Russian roulette. Like you don't know which way it's going to go. Because one of these things that Jessica mentioned back when we had this conversation was that a child being trafficked, maybe any age, she said this, it kind of blew me away. They would never wear a seatbelt because if things go bad or go wrong, they need to be able to jump out at a moment's notice. And I've seen that to be true with Saving Innocence. We've had kids literally jump out of moving cars that are advocates. We're the good people. We're trying to take care of them, but they're so in this space of not being able to trust anyone and trying to survive. They're literally jumping out of cars to get back to the trafficker or run away or whatever the case may be. It's like, okay, regular society doesn't understand that. And I would say most people have never been in a true life or death situation. Maybe people that are growing up in the inner city, that they wouldn't say that necessarily. They would feel it more, but most people don't live in the inner cities. Most people live somewhere else. And so this is part of this. We're hoping to open the eyes of a lot of people, and not to mention the main focus is men, to know what people are going through. Okay, next topic here. Perception of men while people are in the life. And we talk about that a little bit in the book here and there. And this is not men bashing. This is not heaping a pile of coals on every man because all the men are doing this and all that kind of stuff. That's not the tone of the book. It's to open the eyes of us men, our actions. What is it that we are doing, even if we're not going so far as buying a person for sex? We might be contributing to this exploitive culture in some way, shape, or form. So I'd love to hear your guys' take, either from your own experiences, if you feel like it, or from the many people that you've worked with over the years. In the book, Rachel says, my perception of men is that they were predatory. They're hunting. A predator hunts. Ori says, my perception of men is that everyone wanted to buy sex from a child because that's all I ever saw. Nola, the great Nola Brantley says, I thought I was put on this earth to satisfy people sexually. That's what I thought. That was my purpose. I thought, okay, this is not going well. Okay, this is the perception of men. I'm a man. I don't like those. I don't like to hear that. But we as men, and my male voice, got to get to as many men as possible and help them understand. What would you guys add to that? Either from your own experience, if you want to share that, or just from the experiences of people you work with. What are some of the perceptions of men while you're in that life, while the girls, mostly girls, are in the life?
I mean, I would say that I had a really horrible breakup in high school that I can remember this moment thinking, I will never let someone get over on me like that again. My little young 16-year-old self, right? Like I will never. And so I think I carried some of that maybe as part of my desensitization into like when I was being groomed by my trafficker, unbeknownst to me, right? But I think I carried, or he picked up on some of my thought patterns around, I'm going to screw them over. And so every dude became a trick to me. I will screw every one of you over. I will not let you get over on me like he did. And so then it was easier to almost like take out your vengeance, for lack of better words, on every one of you are a mark and a target. And he really flipped this false sense of empowerment for us. I can remember, and I shared this a little bit in the memoir, so I don't mean to be redundant, but on Halloween, I was trafficked in Vegas mainly, and in Halloween there would be girls that dressed up like they were working girls, quote unquote. It's like their only day of the year that they would put on mini skirt fishnets and a feather boa and walk around Las Vegas. And I can remember driving with my trafficker. He was driving, and I can literally remember picturing driving really slowly and him pointing and going, do you see those girls? They wish they could be you. They wish they could be you. They wish they could be as brave as you. They wish they could be as seductive as you. They wish that men wanted them like men want you. We can do this. We're going to get over on them. And so it was this lure for me of like, you're right. I'm going to get back at them and it's going to be empowering. Damn it. Like it was, I think, I mean, I couldn't have put that kind of language to that back then, but now that I've had time to think through it and really some of those moments that really stood out for me in my memory, I think a lot of what you remember is helpful because it's obviously something that stuck. And so I don't know, Jessica, I'd love to hear your perspective too. I think between Rachel and Noah and you and everyone, we all have a little bit different perspective. I think it's really about the trafficker tries to figure out what's going to make you tick, and then he sells you that. That's also, I think, another component that we need to not skip over. But sorry.
No, sorry. No, 100%. And it's like my point of view is kind of a bit of all of you guys, right? Because it's all of that, right? They're different, but they're so connected. And like, I remember meeting a Supervisor Kanabi for the first time out here. And I remember like looking at him and like being terrified. It's, this older conservative white male, and he's standing here in this position of power. And I'm not cowering, but I'm watching and I'm backing up like, nope, and just remembering that feeling. And I remember him taking his time, and I would have never expected him to take his time with me the way that he did in gaining my trust. Right? Not like, oh, you poor little, but he's just like, hi, my name is Don. This is so on and so forth. Hey, I'd love to sit down and talk to you. This is what I'm like, just being a very open book. And I never really got to run across men like that really ever. It's that small little section of the men in your family. They're kind of like the give, right? They're the exception. But then everybody's either a trick or a perk or both. There's really kind of like not too many in-betweens. And I mean, there are other things to identify, but those are like the root of it, right? You're either a buyer or you're trying to get me somehow, to harm me, to do whatever, to use me, to put me out there, to gain off of me, whatever it is, or you're just an abuser. It was everything negative. There was no trusting men. And really I was groomed to just trust my folks. You trust me. I'm your daddy. My grandfather never talked to me that way. My grandfather never treated me that way. My grandfather spoke to me as assertive, but as loving as possible. But then this man that comes up to me and is my exploiter, it's so rigid and it's so hard and it's so abusive and it's so manipulative and all these different things. So getting out, and I love how you said, like, we're rewired. We're heavily rewired before we get in, while we're in, and when we get out, we're totally different people. You know what I mean? And so the biggest thing is just like not trusting whatsoever, because like at the end of the day, I don't know whether you're going to be a trick or a treat. I don't know if you're going to come out of a bag bad on me or not. So I think like that's just the biggest thing, is just the trust. Even when I met Alan, I'm about to put you on the spot, Alan.
Okay.
So because everything was cool. I'd been working in the field for a while, but I still look at people. I'll smile. I still look at people like I don't know you, And I remember Alan coming up to me, hey, Jess, how you doing? I've heard so much about you. I've seen a couple things about you. I'd really love to get to know you. I'm not trying to be, did you say like, you're not trying to be weird? It was something you said, Alan, where you're like, I'm not trying to, but it was just very like palms up, very open, very like, hey, I'm interested in what you have to say, but no pressure. And that was something that was very easy for me to take on with Alan. He's a man that I actually wholeheartedly 100% trust, as opposed to most men, never. Relationship wise, can we just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah.
Getting out of the life. Even if the dude is a straight up square, he's never been no parts of in the life. And usually that first, second, third, so on and so forth relationship always mirrors the exploiter to some extent, whether no matter how small or how big, is what I've seen. I shouldn't say always, I'll say the majority of the time. And my relationships ain't work out. I'm gonna just put it like that. Because I still look at him, I'll be like, I'm watching you.
Yeah.
I see, you know what I mean? So I didn't mean to go left, but it's just like, it's just it's the trust issue. you know, because you don't know when to trust versus not. And whenever you started to trust, like say, for instance, your exploiter or that regular you went out on a date with, then all of a sudden they pulled something and they totally went left field. And it was something that was very abusive or something that just was out of the ordinary. And it kind of like stunned you. So it's like left that imprint or that mark in your mind to go on until you're able to work through it. And even then it's still there. So I can go on forever, but y'all know what I mean.
Rebecca, Jessica brings up something really interesting because, as we mentioned before, I follow you on social media and you kind of live a lot of your life on social media in a good way. It seems like you got this great husband and these great kids and this wonderful little family life. And you don't, need to share anything you don't want to share, of course, obviously. But I'm curious in that right when you're just leaving the life before you met your husband, how was that for you in terms of trusting men and based on this earlier perception of men? How was that for you, that part of your journey?
Yeah, these are such great conversations, and I'm always such an open book about this. A lot more in survivor groups and when we talk, just because you don't want to put all your business on social media, right? But often and with maturing, I have learned that I've talked about things once I've had some time to process, not in the moment of my heated argument, right? And that's just something I've learned the hard way. But when I first got out of trafficking, I ran off with I went and lived with the buyer. And so that I think mirrored a lot more of my exploitation that Jessica you're referring to. And we were even chatting right before we were doing this and that I was like, oh yeah, I ran off with someone from the IRA and they had balaclavas and you're like, what? Like, oh yeah, I did. We didn't mention part of that story. You'll get in the book. You'll see it in the book. So I think there was a lot more of that in that relationship, but to be really honest, for me, I just had my own spiritual pilgrimage of what is this power greater than myself? Why did I live when others die? And just kind of set out on this own journey. And during that, it was my time in the UK that I really felt that it was time to go back to the US. And I will tell you, that was probably one of the harder decisions for me was being in London where I didn't have to work. And to say, I've got to choose homelessness because I can't live like this anymore. I can't live still kind of in the game. Even though I wasn't in exploitation, I was living with a buyer. And I knew that wasn't the way to have an actual healthy relationship for me. Not to say that I haven't known people that's been all right, but for me, I felt convicted. And so, I packed up my little girl and I moved home to the US with nothing. I didn't have a fork. I didn't have a pillow. I just slept on couches, got on food stamps, got on government housing. And I met my husband. And I at first was like, I don't know, what does he want? Oh, he just want, what are you gonna want? And he invited me and my daughter to lunch. And that was the first time that I'd had someone invite both of us. And that was different for me. It felt for the first time like he saw us as a family unit that he wanted to get to know, not, hey, gotta take you out. It was just different. And I immediately told him, this is my story. I'm a survivor of trafficking and I'm gonna tell the world about it. And if you don't like it, don't call me back on date number 2 because I ain't got time for games. I'm 29. I got a kid. I got time to play. And that's how it started. And he was like, I remember him saying, if God is telling you to speak, who am I to tell you no? That was his first answer. And I just immediately was like, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. And so that's how it started for me. It has not been easy at all with my marriage. We've had a lot of ups and downs, but one thing I can say that I really, really love, one, I've had to learn about healthy intimacy and not performance. That's a big one for survivors. And it took me a very long time to figure that out. And 2, I won't say a ton about that because I don't know where this is all going to be. And he's going to be like, dang, girl, you put all the business out there. But the second thing I would say is I had to, there's another speaker and author that I follow, not in the trafficking world at all. Her name's Catherine Wolfe. And she had a stroke when she was young. She was paralyzed on half of her body. And She was in a wheelchair and she walks fairly well now, but she still uses a wheelchair. And she talks about her journey. She wrote a book called Suffer Strong and Hope Heals. And she talks about her journey of having a stroke really early in life and how that shifted her life drastically. They didn't think she was going to live through this stroke. And she talks about how her husband has cared for her during this stroke and during this recovery and this road back to a new normalcy that she's had to find with her life. And as I've been a fan of hers and followed her writing, I've had these revelatory moments in my own heart and mind where I thought, my disability may not be physical, like it may be heart, maybe PTSD, it may be an emotional wound. But during this journey in my marriage, my husband has cared for my recovery well. Just like her husband has cared for her while she learned to walk again, my husband has cared for my heart during my recovery. And he has sat up with me when I've had night terrors, and he's calmed me down when I'm wanting to flip out on someone because my PTSD, I'm like, I'm getting a trigger, I'm about to knock this girl in the mouth. And he's like, we're at church. It's the pastor's wife. Go to the car. Something's wrong with you.
That's so real. That's so real.
And I wish I was exaggerating. I'm not. I'm prone to exaggeration. I'm a preacher, and that was not fake. It's happened to me twice where I almost knocked the pastor's wife out. And my husband has cared for my extremities well, though. He's like, I'm going to pray for you because this is not normal, honey. Like this isn't normal responses. And your heightened emotional response is not matching what just happened. And we need to get you in therapy, and we need to get you. And so for me, that's just been, it hasn't been easy for us to navigate that journey, but I've really honored the way he has cared for my heart during my recovery. I don't know. That's a really long answer. I'm sorry, but I just want to make sure to get that in for the men because you matter.
Yeah.
And, I had a really great grandpa growing up. I had a great uncle. My dad, I love him to death. We have a great relationship today. He did the best that he knew in the beginning of his own substance abuse areas. But I know that good men exist, and so I want to encourage you, like you're changing the way, and men that are watching, not just you, Alan, all the men watching, or you change the way that we get to see healthy men. And that really matters because a lot of us have never seen it. A lot of people hadn't seen it. A lot of us, like you said, Jessica, you had a great, grandpa yourself. I had a great I know you said grandfather. That's why I was like, wait, what was the word you used? I had a great grandpa too. And, when you meet good men that want nothing in return, that shifts the way you see it. And so we want to encourage men to get involved, stay in the fight, jump in and want nothing in return. And we can sense it when you do. Don't get it twisted. We have discernment. I mean, that's something with survivors. We've had to use our gut instinct to stay alive. So it's pretty sharp. So if you have ill motive stepping in, people will feel it. They will. So check your motives.
That's true. Check them at the door.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. That's really, really powerful. And, one of my burdens, if you will, that I carry, that I feel a lot, and working at a place where there's 27 women and me, and then we recently hired a guy doing some accounting, is that all these women I work with, not to mention all the kids we serve, are just inundated by disproportionately number of brutal examples of masculinity and manhood, and that takes a toll, and that's part of the motivation of this book, is to challenge all the men out there that are good men. There's more good men out there than we think, necessarily, but challenging a greater step into a really helpful, healing, powerful masculinity that's going to bring healing to the world and not wounding. And I'm so happy that you found your amazing husband. That's great. Okay, a couple more. We'd written a lot of this book. It took a couple of years. We were kind of just laboring away, tinkering at it, and then life happened, and we're running a nonprofit. We weren't on the quick train to get this written, which I'm actually glad looking backwards because it's morphed and tweaked quite a bit. But this section of the book, I felt like it was a little thin on the basic question and when anyone's kind of learning about this and learning about these people that are being trafficked. It's like, why don't you just leave? I don't get it. You're not, you mean you're not being held in a dungeon under with chains? I mean, why don't you just run away? And we addressed some of it, but it was needing a little bit more. And then right there, Rebecca, you posted something, you know, in between the beehive and the track meet, you posted something that, and the very title said, why don't they leave? And you had this kind of this long post beautifully saying, here's why they don't leave. And you had some really, I thought, something really profound to say about it. And so I copied and pasted, I emailed you, hey, can I use this for the book? You said, sure. And so it's in the book. Do you remember which post I'm talking about? Do you remember that section as to why you didn't leave or why people don't leave in a similar situation right away?
Yeah, it's the same like little, my little spiel I use at a lot of trainings.
Yeah.
Do you want me to say it?
Well, yeah. Tell us, unpack that a little bit. Tell us what it is, the essence of why they don't leave, according to Rebecca Bender.
I mean, I think the thing that I wrote on social that you're referring to is where I say, yeah, why don't I just grab a grenade, bomb the Bellagio, jump out the window and run for freedom like Angelina Jolie did it. Why can't you? And I just laugh thinking like, this isn't the movies. And, you know, another great survivor leader friend of ours, Elle Snow, she talks about her story even where she'll say she kept thinking at the next red light, I'm going to jump out. And she says, but every light was green. And within 3 blocks, we were there. And so I think culture tends to have this idea based on a lot of movies and entertainment on what trafficking should look like and what an escape should look like. And they're probably locked in the basement and, you know, crying for help. And it's like, we just have these really vast stereotypes and misconceptions based on the culture that people were raised in. What I want to remind people of is that as survivors, we grew up in the same culture as you two. So we also grew up believing that's what it looked like, which means when my situation wasn't mirroring that, I didn't realize I was being trafficked until it was too late. And so I think that's just important. Like I too pictured kidnapping. I too was looking for the white minivan and the guy offering me puppy and a candy. So I had no clue. And my boyfriend who's whining and dining me is a con artist. I wasn't taught to look for that. I was only taught stranger danger. And so I just think it all gets wrapped up in the same thing we talked about earlier, the vulnerabilities, the desensitization, what's been modeled, what we think what we've already been exposed to, misconceptions of what it is. And then you're in these moments where you have to make split decisions and you aren't always equipped for those really hard split decisions, especially as a young person, especially with all, it's like, it's all wrapped up in the answer of why don't they just run? It's just so much more complex.
Well, I thought it was fascinating. I hadn't thought about it through this exact lens before you wrote that. And the idea is your situation didn't look like what you thought human trafficking was. And so the idea is, how can we expect someone to leave human trafficking when their perception is they're not in human trafficking? How do you leave something that you're not in? You know, kind of a thing. And it's, again, way more complex than that. Jessica said it, and we quoted her in the book, that basically said, you know, the abuse of the known is more comfortable and safer than the unknown possible abuse that's out there. So it made more sense to you, Jess, you can unpack this, to stay where you were, because at least that was known and to a degree manageable, I guess, as opposed to going out to the unknown abuse. It could be even worse. Am I getting you correctly, Jess?
A bit. So that's a lot of unpacking too. It's like the known versus unknown. So with the known too, it's like I've run into so many kids where they were being abused at home. They were going through things at home, and they would have rather gone with that boyfriend that sweet talked them or took them to go get something to eat or was just nice to them the first time. And then even if he flipped the switch, and even though he's doing to me what my family was doing to me and possibly even worse, it's better to be here than to endure it there. And then a lot of times too, like the kids are groomed to, the slang is stay loyal to the soil. You stay down with your folks and you don't go anywhere else. And so you leave that, you're leaving a certain amount of like protection, so to speak. Giving an example, when I was escaping the life, my exploiter, by the way, was locked up. He had other people basically managing me toward the end of my my run in that part of exploitation. And I remember one of his partners, well, they were all fighting over me. It was basically, he knew I didn't want to be with him anymore. So he put a green light on me. He's going to show me how crazy not being with him was going to be for me. He was showing me, I'm the only one that can protect you. I'm the only one that cares about you. See, if you were with me, none of this would have happened. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's always that fear of. And then a lot of it too is that holding on for the love, and even the fear of losing a love, because you've never really felt anything like that ever before. There's so much fear of, where it keeps you almost firmly planted in that part of life. But a number of kids, they would rather be abused outside of the actual home than be abused within the home, is what I've run across. And Rebecca, if you want to jump in, you add anything to it.
No, I love what you're saying. And I think what's so great about your examples, and what I think, whomever's watching this and whomever's going to pick up the book and get involved, is that, there's so many different types of exploitation, from pimp controlled, gang controlled, familial, illicit massage, cantinas. Those are kind of the most common that exist within our areas. And even within the community you live, there might be some that are more prevalent than others, right? If you go to some areas, illicit massage is really prevalent. I moved to Dallas. One of the first things I heard from survivor leaders was like, oh, you've got that strip club game out there. And I didn't really understand it until I got here. And that strip clubs is how everyone traffics their girls. Dallas is really known for, that's where you start, so you can build a regular base. And so every kind of area has something that's common, more common type of exploitation. And so, what I'm hearing you talk about, which is, real similar to my experiences too, which is, there's a real cult-like mentality with the game. And even in the words we use, our family, our folks, like, they're intentional. Choosing up, choosing fee. That girl chose me. Oh, she's a choosy Susie. All these things are like, the emphasis is put on your decision or your lack of character, to the game life, to the street life, to the gang type of mentality. And so what I love about the Avery Center, which is a survivor-led, co-founded data and research organization out of Colorado, they partnered with the University of Northern Colorado to do this research report that shows that pimp-controlled domestic exploitation fit every indicator of cult behavior, where you have a control group leader, high control group leader, a community that lives by its own set of ideologies. You have rules that you follow. Everyone's giving into the family pot. And so you have this, when people are like, why don't they just run? Because it hasn't been a Jekyll and Hyde, I was free and now I'm kidnapped moment. This has been a slow, gradual recruitment into a cult. And now I have been brainwashed into my loyalty to a cult. And I have other women in this cult, and I can't leave her. She's my cult member. She's my sister. We're in this together. And people don't realize, when we talk about mental chains, that's it. It's that added trauma, added vulnerability, added, like, all of it. But this real sense of family and folks, and this is my people, and this is my dude, and this is my man, and these are my wife-in-laws. And it's this very incestuous, cult-like group that, until you've been able to separate and work on deprogramming, you're bound to continually go back, because you tend to remember only the good, right? Well, when I was there, at least I never had to worry about rent. No, but you had to worry about Russian roulette when you were knocking on doors. Don't you remember that part? And so I think when you hear and read up about any cult survivors, they have very similar feelings that we have had as survivors of trafficking. And so I just find the psychology around it really interesting, because it's also, we're not like alone. We're not alone in the feelings of survivor guilt. We're not alone in reminiscing how it used to be in a community where we really once felt loved. We are not alone in that. And if we can pivot our investigations, prosecution, and direct service to being more thoughtful around cult behavior, I think we'd see a different response than the crime of prostitution. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's
Yes.
incredibly profound. We need to wrap up here real quick, but I want to ask one more quick thing here. Um, Rebecca and Jess, if you guys could send one brief message, somehow we had the technology to press a button, and all the young ones or slightly older ones who are currently being trafficked right now, what would you want to tell them? What's your message? You got like 140 characters or whatever it is. What would you say? What do they need to hear from you?
I mean, I think I just keep thinking about what we just said of, you're not alone. These aren't new feelings you're having. We've been there too. And you can do this. You can do it without him. You can do it on your own. Whatever dangling carrot he's giving you, you can do it without him. And there's a whole army of anti-trafficking advocates here that want to help you get there without him. That's what I would say.
Jess, what do you want to say in 140 characters to these kiddos that are out there, these young ones?
I mean, Rebecca's covering it. She's covering it.
You nailed it.
So, I love her. So it's a lot of cuss words going through my head, but in the most positive way possible. Rebecca, you already started. Yes, you and Alan, y'all hear it. It's just, you can do anything that you set your mind to. This isn't the end. This is not death. Life is ahead of you. You have nothing but life ahead of you. You have a legacy that you're supposed to put together and push forward. And it's okay to trust. And sometimes you take the bad with the good, but you learn to really take in and hold on and cherish the good. And I always in my head, little me, I always say, run, girl, run. Don't run to it, run away from it, And even if there's only one person that you feel like you can trust, reach out to that person. Do whatever you possibly can to get yourself into a good space to where you are comfortable. If you could, this probably sounds really bad and you can edit it out, Alan, but if you can be out there and you can go through hell and high water for someone that you love, invest that love into yourself and go through hell and high water for yourself. Beautiful. And get to the other side because you're worth it. That's it.
Okay, Rebecca, I know you got to leave. One final thing, why is this book important? You said yes to be part of this book and this Zoomcast. When I say why is this book, really it's a conversation aimed at men. Hit us hard with a conclusion. Why is this important conversation happening?
I just think all of these conversations are so important. You have so many people with so many different lived experiences, both from going through it themselves to being a part of this field. And I think this is a message that is going to ignite, like you said, you're writing it for men to get involved in a way that helps just show. I just think that we don't engage men enough. I think that we need your involvement. We want you here, and we want to encourage people to step in because we need to see healthy men, healthy masculinity. I love your tagline, authentic masculinity. We need more of that. I think it's going to radically shift what we've been modeled. And that's, for me, the beginning of also just real, true restoration is being able to see it's that trust. It's not relationship for a romantic relationship's sake. It's breaking these things that we've built up about a group of people that are stopping us sometimes from walking into healthy mentorship, healthy bosses, healthy relationships with people in our lives, learning how to trust again in general. Like, I just think that it's, men play a really crucial fight, and we want to invite them into the conversation more. So I'm really excited you're doing this.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. Well, this whole project, this whole conversation, the book lives on a website that we're creating called fightforme.net. I don't know if you've looked at it yet, Rebecca, but in the resources tag, we've tagged Rebecca Bender Initiative. So everyone can go to the Rebecca Bender Initiative. You can pick up your new favorite book. And along with all the other amazing professionals and survivors that have contributed to the book, we've linked all their stuff on this website. And that'll be the place where the book can be purchased along with everything else. So, Rebecca,
look at you guys, your first book, Jessica, this is great.
Let's go.
You guys,
I'm trying to catch up to you, sis. I'm trying to catch up.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah.
Rebecca, it's been really fun to have you be part of this right here the last hour, but just to have you be part of this book, it's a real honor. We're very grateful that you are participating in some degree, and we're cheering you on all the way from California. Way to go.
Ditto. I love it. Love you guys. So proud of you. Proud with you. Proud for you. It's I know how hard it is to birth a book baby, and I'm just it's so fun, and I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to see what this does to rock people's world. So great job.
That's great. Thanks so much. Great.
All right.
See you
See you
soon.
guys later.
Later. Thank